Thanks for this opportunity to speak to you today. It's a pleasure and always a pleasure to speak before such a distinguished group of pharma executives. First, I'd like to give you a little bit of background. What I offer today is only a perspective, a sketch. There are, of course, others, and it's merely meant to stimulate thought and discussion in opening today's topic. As far as experience, in my experience, I first gained experience in the global workplace through my volunteer work with World Learning, School for International Training. And also I've had over 35 years of working in developing Japanese executives. Over 10 of those years have been in the pharmaceutical space. I was also responsible for bringing together Hokkaido University and the University of Missouri into a memorandum of understanding and joint exchange. But again, still it's only a perspective. There are different opinions, and we will share these today in our discussion. So the question you've asked about and asked to be addressed today by the various speakers is, what will it take to genuinely cultivate Japanese potentials to be effective global leaders? It's a good question. There are no simple solutions, I say, and no single approach. There's no simple solution to identifying talent that has the potential to be effective in global leader positions, or for Japan as a nation to contribute more talent as global leader with global leader competencies. But there are some common perspectives on what works. And I've separated that out into pathways and solutions, short-term pathways and long-term solutions. But before I get into that, let me share quickly about what not to do. And that is to take it simply from either a Japanese perspective or a Western perspective. What you're trying to do when you train a global leader is to change culture. And if you look at this, small things such as skills or procedure are small, and they can be accomplished in terms of weeks or months. But larger things, such as adapting to culture or understanding greater cultural diversity, is a large change and often takes years. The Japanese perspective often is that it can be done in quick study methodologies and crash courses. That's not true. The Western perspective often says it can simply be drilled down or demanded, and that itself is also not true. Because what you're trying to do is change automatic behaviors, and that requires a synthesis of culture. Changing automatic behaviors takes time. It takes planning and intention and consistent execution with a healthy dose of patience. And the degree of change that you'll see will be incremental over a longer period of time. Now, having said that, we also have to have a common awareness, or constant awareness rather, of something that's called the Kruger-Dunning effect. Because in both cultures we tend to fail through or by this effect. And basically, the Kruger-Dunning effect is that the less you know about something, the more you tend to overestimate your competence. Now, how to show that very easily is to show the Kruger-Dunning effect with the axis being what I think I know about Japanese culture, so this is from a Western perspective, and how long I've been in Japan. And as you can see, in the very early years of being in Japan, a person thinks they know quite a bit. But as they've stayed here longer, they realize that they know far less than they thought they did. That kind of context has to be kept in mind in training global leaders, because in the beginning, either one, Western or Eastern culture, will think, I really do know in the early years what's going on, and in reality, they may not. So again, back to short-term pathways and long-term solutions. I define short-term as perhaps achievable in our lifetime. And I want to show you quickly some assessment tools and some career development plans and programs. And then I also want to emphasize here on the young. So short-term, again, defined as achievable in our lifetime, assessment tools. There are 3 tools that I've used. There are others, but these are 3 useful ones. And one is a global readiness profile. The other is the DISC behavioral model. And then one that I really enjoy, especially in assessing emotional intelligence, is a value and action survey. I want you to keep in mind that for the most part, not always, but for the most part, English proficiency should be considered last. And the reason for that is because it can be picked up fairly quick. If in fact all the competencies that a potential employee has are present except for English, that should not preclude that employee from being developed. So keep in mind that one of the things I say is that the potential must have high integrity and character first, that you identify employees with potential strengths and character strengths, that you create significant opportunities to experience leadership outside of Japan. This is speaking to Japanese potentials. And then, this is most important, when the employee returns to Japan, engage them in ways that prevent them from what I call eating too much rice. And that also goes for gaijins as well. Again, English can be required. So what does Harvard Business School say are typical global executive competencies? We have them here: open-minded and flexible in thought and tactics, have cultural interest and sensitivity, they're able to deal with complexity, they're resilient, resourceful, optimistic and energetic, again, honesty and integrity, they have a stable personal life, and they add value to technical, or with their technical and business skills. Now, I've put together some global competencies, or commonalities rather, that I see over the years that I've been doing this, and they are that the person that's globally ready has significant overseas experience or gains that they have solid secondary education, often including study outside of Japan, that they have solid leader competencies, and I'll talk later about managing versus leading and concept ability, that they have an understandable level of English which improves over time, that they have strong cognitive ability, that's the left brain, we'll talk about that in a moment, that they have strong interpretive competency and tendency, that they have strong extemporaneous ability, they can participate without preparation, that they have natural reference skills, I'll speak to that also in a moment, and that they have a high level of emotional intelligence, right brain function, and I'll also speak about that in a moment. So Harvard Business Review, in an article February 17th, shared that global executive companies should focus on values and not hierarchy, and that the characteristics of successful global leaders today are quite different than the traditional hierarchical managers. That global leaders need high levels of emotional intelligence and self-awareness in order to unite people of different cultures around the organization's mission and its values, as well as to empower them to make decisions without waiting for higher level directions. So again, back to assessment tools. How do we assess some of those competencies that we just saw? And again, I bring up the Global Readiness Profile, the DISC Behavioral Model, and the Values and Action Survey, but I want to repeat again, these are only 3 of some very good assessment tools that are available out there. The Global Readiness Profile, just to show you quickly, shows 25 elements of global readiness. And those are broken down and categorized further under Business Profile, Communication Profile, Self-Assessment Profile, and a Supervisor's Profile. And here you see just an example of what some of the output would look like on all those profiles. And you can see that the range from 1 to 30 would say, once this has been done, would say that person is unsuitable currently for overseas stationing. However, with 65 or above, they'd be ready, willing, and able to do that. It's a quick sketch, and here you can see that in greater detail. We had done this actually for a number of employees at Merck and found it was quite reliable, quite effective. The other thing that it does is there's this tendency to have standardized lists of global leaders' competencies that reinforce a one-size-fits-all of global leadership. And McKinsey's quarterly basically says to avoid that, and that a company may find it useful to recruit for and develop a small set of key competencies across all of its global leaders. The Global Readiness Profile attempts to not standardize that list and actually meet this requirement. The other assessment tool that I've often used is the DISC assessment tool. As a standalone, this does not indicate global readiness, but it is a very interesting awareness tool, and it provides a common language that people can use to better understand themselves and adapt their behaviors with other. And from that perspective, it becomes helpful in looking to what and determining what employees might be globally ready. And here you simply see the four categories that the DISC tool shows of dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And what I've typically found is that those who are take the global readiness are being assessed for global readiness rather, one would think that dominance or influence, which are typical leader categories, would translate directly to those that are global ready. But the data suggests that it's actually those who have influence and steadiness that are more global ready people in your organization. And then finally, another tool that I've used is called the Value and Actions Survey. It's an inventory of strengths based on positive psychology. It's a survey of the most admirable, respectable, and desirable strengths in human beings. There are 24 character strengths across 6 virtue categories, and they have shown to be valuable and meaningful in multiple societies and cultures throughout recorded history. And the top 5 of those, interestingly, are the character strengths that a person will instinctively or intuitively go to, especially when they're under stress. Now, this was originally developed by 2 professors, Peterson and Seligman, who were trying to see if character could in fact be measured. And what I found is that it's a very, very helpful EI tool as well. It allows one to assess their self-awareness. It's an indication of where an employee will thrive, both looking at the top and lower 5 values. It's helpful in understanding and developing teams. There's an excellent team report that identifies the integrators on a team. And the integrators on a team are typically the hub that basically holds the wheel together. It's helpful to leaders in understanding and anticipating what will motivate or direct. And as I say, it's an effective EI development tool. Here's a simple screen print of what that might look like. When you can see the top, this is an actual one from an employee that we evaluated, and you can see the categories. And also the curve will tell you a little bit about the person's character and their character strengths. This next screen shows you where we had assessed the character strengths within a given team. And the pink ones that you see there were the team's strengths. That assessment tool, that VAA character strengths tool, also puts out some really nice reporting that shows you the team's percentage and raw scores, and then also shows you those that are most qualified in team functions based on their character strengths. So this becomes a very, very useful early indicator of a potential employee's participation on a global team, for example. We had successfully kicked this off as using VIA as an EI effectiveness tool at MSD. But like any tool, it doesn't work with all people. And more often than not, it has to be combined with realistic thought partnering plan or coaching for the employee to be developed well. So again, back looking at Harvard Business Review and Harvard Business School's statement, focus on values, not hierarchy. Global leaders need high levels of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And again, I would say that the VIA tool is one of the helpful assessment tools to look at emotional intelligence and self-awareness. So again, the 3 tools that I've used most often for within a solid and realistic development plan are the Global Readiness Profile, the DISC Behavioral Model, and the Value and Action Survey. So those are the short-term, achievable in our lifetime tools. But then let's move to career development plan, programs, and pathways for young potentials. The development plan as I see it, a successful development plan as I see it, has some overall features. They provide some initial coaching to identify employees' professional as well as life goals. They have a tailored plan, I call it a Global Readiness Improvement Plan for each individual. The VAA survey actually helps there too. They provide a leader, mentor, and coach, usually that's in-company and or third party, throughout the plan, both overseas and in-country. A lot of companies make the mistake of having it only in-company, but often a third-party coach is very helpful, and that if that coach is engaged even lightly throughout the entire development plan, it's helpful. And I say that the mentor should be a high-level recognized leader in the company. The coach should have solid hands-on brick-and-mortar experience over coaching credentials. And then to complement, the plan complements by using educational models wherever possible and effective. And here's a big one. HR role in a successful development plan, as I've seen it, is simply to administer it. They're usually not, and I know this may make some upset, but each HR's role usually is not very effective in creating the development plan, but highly effective often in administering it. Most of all, I recommend you start early in the employee's career and identify those potentials early, and that you mitigate bias. Often employees are chosen by sales performance or supervisor feedback, and have proven, but you want ones that have proven their leaders outside of the employee's domain, and often that can be assessed through an interview. Get your potentials overseas early for significant, lengthy assignments, if that's at all possible. And don't waste your resources if it doesn't work out. Bring them back and replace them with another potential. But if you use some of those tools I just mentioned before, that's likely not to happen. Then importantly, upon their return, you should plan to place them in positions requiring a healthy amount of interaction with global counterparts. It's good global hygiene. It's the same as brushing your teeth every day. You just need to do it consistently. And then, again, metaphorically, be aware of how much rice they eat. Typically in Japanese employments, returning from global assignment will very easily slip back into their own cultural norms. So you want to provide opportunities and modules that help them keep what they have learned active. And look for signs of synthesis. You want a synthesis. You don't want just a Japanese hat or a Western hat. You want to see that they're interpreting. You want to see that they're applying and localizing what they've learned. Employees who demonstrate that they are able to localize global initiatives while at the same time influencing, motivating the same synthesis they developed into those they lead at the best levels into Japan's society. So you want to see that they're actually synthesizing it and that they're then developing others within their company. And then also look for, within the development plan, high levels in practice of EIs. EI, as we saw with the Harvard Business School review, developing global leaders with cultural sensitivities is very important. And then look very carefully at their management versus their leadership, and that they have an appropriate balance of both. And I'll show a little bit of that again in a moment. Now let's just look for a moment at leader competencies, those that are capable of leading an organization. They're able to manage change. They're able to solve problems and make decisions. They manage politics and influence others. They take risks in innovating. They set vision and strategy. They manage the work. They enhance business skills and knowledge. And they understand and navigate the organization well. And the other important leadership competencies is that leaders are able to lead themselves. They display drive and purpose. They exhibit leadership stature. They increase the capacity to learn. They manage themselves. They increase their self-awareness. And they develop their adaptability. And then as we break those out, those competencies that have to do with leading others is they develop others. They value diversity and difference. They build and maintain relationships, and they manage effective teams and work groups. So a little bit further on this theme of managing versus leading, because what you want as you identify these employees is you want those that are showing leader competencies, not managing competencies. So take a look at this and you'll see that this is where we spend most of our time at work. I'm a scientist, I'm a mathematician, strategic, practical, in control, realistic. I know exactly who I am. Now take a look at this right side brain function. This is where EI resides. It's where creativity is, where passion is, where sensuality is, its taste, its movements, its imagination, creativity. Managing versus leading. Managers and teams spend a majority of their time and rely heavily on this left side. And done well, it can come off as leadership. But in reality, it's management. The left side is the executive side of the brain. But the right side informs that. So let's just take a real quick look at this. This is a picture of a person's eyes. Now there are 4 different possibilities for what those eyes are saying. And the correct answer is panicked. Again, here's another. And the correct answer is upset. Why do I show those? It's because only the right side of the brain could inform you of what those eyes are telling you. The right side informs the executive side. And leaders use a balance of both well, and global leaders need to do so even better. Now take a look at this little chart of management versus leadership. And if you look down the left-hand side, you'll see various terms, and then you'll see what is the difference between managing and leading. For example, motto is do things right. Leadership is do the right things. Method is schedules. Leadership is strategy. Outcomes is destinations. Leadership is journeys. And people, under the people category, management is performance. Under leadership, it's potential. Now I ask, does any of this look familiar, highlighting the Japanese side? Often in Japan, we identify leaders who are, in fact, really only managing. So I want to shift gears here for just a moment and talk about long-term solutions. And then we'll end with that and have our discussion. And I believe some of the long-term solutions for Japan, and this again is based on so many years' experience with Japanese and then here in Japan, is that it must start early in the schools and universities. I've already seen some of the conditioning happening with my small son. This conditioning has to change, and the methodologies have to change, and it needs to start early in the schools and in the universities. We need to introduce the value of and respect for diversity at the earliest years. Now there is a global high school program that has been started by the Japanese government. I'm saying that program should start even earlier. And we need to align with Japan's young culture. Japan's culture is changing. The youth of this country are changing their experience and their understanding. We need to tie into that. But perhaps the most important is to influence the universities. I would say the first one and the second one, introduce value, and the last one, influence universities. As companies, you have tremendous leveraging power. Be clear about the experiences you require for the talent you will hire. If a university is known not to be able to place global leaders, that will eventually catch up with them. You have tremendous leverage in that area. So talk to the universities and be very clear about what you require as a company in order to imply it to hire their graduate. So as I close, I'd like to share just a little bit of what some others are saying. This from a senior executive at IKEA in Japan. In a nutshell, Japan executives manage. A focus on and space in which to develop and practice leader competencies is paramount. We need them to lead. And this from Takano-san of Hay Group, who runs Hay Group in Japan. HQ and local staff have different perspectives and common sense, so leaders have to influence and broaden the perspectives of both stakeholders. It is important to utilize any opportunities to visualize differences, understand intentions, and find solutions which align and reconcile. Then from Sakiya Fukushima, who I worked with at Korn Ferry, Japan is in need of a leadership that interacts and communicates as easy as its pop culture. In a globalizing world, Japan needs to be understood. It needs to express opinions more effectively and be part of the world. And then finally from a friend and fellow Rotarian who runs ABIT Corporation, there is a very high wall between the Japanese and foreign executives other than English conversation. Japan executives must have vision to encourage to articulate it, know and embrace how different business cultures can interact, take risk and have this evident in action plans and demonstrate both, have a yes and no clearly, and take every opportunity to speak English even if his or her level is poor. We Japanese are still, in an islander opinion, we are still living on a small island. We need to get off our island and join the world, and not try to adapt the world to our island. So in summary, I would say identify very early your participants. Go with high numbers, and then qualify them later, using those tools and evaluation techniques that I shared with you about. Mentor and coach throughout the development pathway. Give the participants significant overseas engagements, and give them a healthy component of EI development. And when they return, prevent backsliding when they're in Japan. Remove mid-level obstacles, and have your programs created and owned by your leaders. And as I said, leave HR to administer that program. Again, there is no simple solution, and what I share with you today is offered only as a perspective based on what I've observed over my 35 years of training in developing Japanese leaders. It's meant to kick off and stimulate discussion on today's topic, and I look forward now to having that discussion with you.